let's talk about all the fantastic differences between the Teen Wolf movie and TV show. Depending on which school of thought you subscribe to, you either think that werewolves are more wolf than man, or vice versa. In the Teen Wolf movie, Michael J. Fox's Scott had the whole furry thing going down. With long hair, fluffy paws, sharp claws, and a layer of prosthetics, he kinda disappeared into the werewolf costume, being almost unrecognizable from his human form. It wasn't particularly scary to look at, mind you, but you instantly knew that he was supposed to be more beast than man. On the TV show, however, let's just say that the transformation is a lot more, well, sexy. With such a good-looking cast, MTV didn't want to hide the actors' faces under a ton of prosthetics, so it went for a minimalist design. Gone were the long hair and matted fur, while only the faces and claws would be changed, yet still keeping the actors' features prominent at all times. Undoubtedly, it was a simpler approach, and probably less time-consuming than having actors sit in the makeup chair for hours on end before the shoot. Although, you can't deny that the film version had an endearing quality to it, reminding the audience of a time when creature features relied more on clever practical effects than CGI. But there was one curious change made to the TV show that still puzzles most fans.
An explanation is probably long overdue.
For some reason, Tyler Posey's Scott was into lacrosse, not basketball like the original Scott. You could argue that lacrosse is certainly a more physical game and a werewolf's strength would come in handy here. However, a lycanthrope's agility is just as essential for b-ball. So why the sudden change to extracurricular activities? The show's writer and producer Jeff Davis said that it's because they could hide Scott's transformation under the helmet and make it less obvious to the other players around him. In basketball, well, you don't wear anything on your head except maybe a sweatband. Also, while the film's plot centered around Scott's domination of the basketball court, and it's arguably the most iconic scene from the movie, the TV show used sport as a smaller subplot instead. Considering how the series needed to run across multiple seasons, it might have been a hard sell to the network to have a story about a werewolf wanting to win a lacrosse championship over 100 episodes. So, in this case, it makes complete sense why there was more focus on the other elements of the story beyond competitive sport. While both Scotts preferred vastly different ball sports, they also had strikingly contrasting origin stories. And no, neither of them was bitten by a radioactive chihuahua, in case you were unsure about that.
What the hell does that mean?
For Tyler's character, he was bitten by an alpha werewolf that gave him a whole bunch of powers and new issues to deal with as well. Poor kid didn't know what to do with himself in the early stages. Now, in the film, Scott's curse was all in the family. The only reason his dad, Harold, had never told him about it was because he presumed it would have skipped a generation. But to be fair, his dad had kind of learned to live with it and wasn't all too fazed that his boy was just like him. Needless to say, the film treats werewolfism more like a gift than a curse per se, whereas the TV show initially treated it as the latter. That doesn't mean that Tyler's character disliked this sudden turn of dramatic events, though. After all, he ended up using his powers much like the film version of the character. So while there was a change in how they came to be werewolves, their acceptance of their circumstance was quite similar when all was said and done. But this wasn't the only tweak in their origin either, because there was another big alteration. So, the one thing that both the TV show and film did right was to keep the single-parent element intact, though it was done slightly differently in each adaptation. In the film, Scott lived with his dad, Harold, while on the show, Scott lived with his mom, Melissa. Obviously, we've already discussed how Harold passed on the werewolf gene to his son as being unique to the movie, but he also knew pretty much straight away that Scott was a werewolf. On the show, Melissa wasn't in on her son's secret from the start, only being brought into the know much later. However, once she knew about it, she actually became one of his biggest allies and an integral part of the storylines going forward. Harold, on the other hand, was just used mainly for exposition fodder and to explain Scott's backstory, but he was nowhere near as big a part of proceedings as Melissa was. In fact, Harold probably got more lines and screen time in the sequel, Teen Wolf 2, which was all about Scott's cousin, Todd. By including Melissa far more in Scott's story, it ended up being a positive move, as it helped to show the special dynamic and bond between parent and child, even if the kid unexpectedly ends up being a werewolf. And speaking of the unexpected, the two Scotts had opposing views on telling people about their fluffy little secret. While the film version of the character kept his hairy events under wraps at first, he eventually let the whole school know who he was at the basketball game. Well, not quite by choice, but he just embraced it and the fame that came with it for a while. On the show, Tyler Scott only lets in a handful of people into his circle of trust, trying to keep the secret as closely guarded to his chest as possible. If you think about it, this approach is easily the smartest thing thing you can do. Because honestly, if you were a werewolf, would you be screaming it from the rooftops?
I'm a werewolf.
Unlikely, since you know that there will always be someone trying to exploit you or put their snout in your business. And also, for some reason, the world only likes fluffies when they're dogs and cats, but has something against werewolves. Seriously, by announcing that you're part of the Lycan tribe, you could also be attracting the wrong kind of attention. You know, the kind you don't want, like from other werewolves. And while we're on the topic, that's another thing that the TV show and film handled in an entirely different way. In the Teen Wolf film series, it was commonly accepted that there were other werewolves hanging around, though you didn't really get to meet many of them on screen. On the show, however, there are not just werewolves, but other kinds of monsters too. From chimeras to weird coyotes, you just never know what could be lurking around a super creepy and dark corner. Again, it makes sense why a monster universe was uniquely created for the TV show. If you have so many episodes to fill, it'll get stale rather quickly if it's only werewolves battling other werewolves every week. So, the writers had to be inventive and think of new foes for Scott to encounter and interact with. Fortunately, these characters never diluted the impact or influence of the Teen Wolf franchise, but added a new dimension to it. Heck, they expanded the whole universe and made it much bigger. Who knows, maybe if the films had continued, we would have seen some other creatures featured as well. We do know that there were plans for a Teen Wolf 3 starring Alyssa Milano, where she would have been a white wolf who played ice hockey, but that sadly never came to fruition. But hey, there's always time to make that a reality in today's age, right? Ultimately, Scott and Scott were in two very different kinds of productions. Apart from the change in surname, the TV show leaned heavily on the typical melodrama of teen series, but it also wasn't afraid to get darker and grittier, embracing the supernatural and horror elements.
You scared the hell out of me.
Seriously, you couldn't help but get a little frightened by the nature of the storylines at times. On the other hand, or paw in this case, the Teen Wolf film was far more whimsical and reminiscent of John Hughes comedies of the era. It was totally fun and meant to be lighthearted entertainment. You never got a sense of dread or terror from it, as it played to the more positive aspects of being a werewolf rather than the more, bloody tendencies. So, why did the TV show change the tone so drastically? Well, it depends on who you ask. The official explanation is that it was an intentional move, as the creators wanted to play with more of the lore surrounding werewolves and the supernatural. However, the more likely reason is that MTV had seen the success of Twilight in the years prior and wanted to replicate it for the small screen. And hey, considering the fact that it ran for 6 successful seasons, there's no doubt the right decision was taken here. All of this talk about Teen Wolf has left us hungry for some more hairy discussion. So how about you sink your teeth into this hilarious bloopers and funny moments video? And while you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and stay awesome!